Alright, guys, I am running into some memory capacity issues for class with this format of me trying to screen record myself, so it's somewhat interesting and you get to see a person and the PowerPoint. So, I'm going to try to condense these lectures a little bit, and if we are feeling like we're not being adequately um, supplied the info, I can post the chapters if need be. So I took my mouth splint out so I don't have to lisp. They'll get over it. I want to be able to clearly talk to you guys. So we're gonna go over chapter 7 and 8, which is over team cohesion. Okay, so the development of these athletes and how the audience impacts them, and how we impact the audience. So the conceptual model of team cohesion is the strength and extent of interpersonal connection existing among members of a group. There's two perceptions of how this cohesion happens. We have group integration, so we'll go about it in the next slide, but basically how the group appeals to the individual, and then the individual attractions, which is kind of within the name, right? How the group gets attracted to the individual. A little bit more formal definition for y'all is the group integration reflects the individual's perceptions about the closeness, similarities, and bonding with the group as a whole. Our individual attractions are our perceptions, our personal motivations, what would attract a group or attract us to the group, as well as the individual's personal feelings about the group. And so this little table is within the chapter 7, but we can see how it divides, right, into individual attraction and group integration. And then we have a subcategory of the social aspect and the task aspect, which we're about to go into. So, both perceptions have two focal points. We have the group's goal objectives. So if we're all part of a soccer team, our objective is probably to score and win. And then we have social orientation, so social status. So whether it be popularity, who is the leader of the group, who is team captain. These are all influences onto how the cohesion of the group operates. Is it smooth? Is it rough? And generally, throughout this whole chapter, the summary is when everyone's goals align and the orientation aligns, we get along better. And so this did it on its own. Interesting. Okay, let's go back. So real quick, what I want to add to this is, if you guys are confused, think of the relationships you have in your own life, those that are task related and those are social related. Maybe a task related would be a coworker at a job. You guys have to work together. And then a social orientation would be friends from school, friends of a group, athletes are shared responsibilities. You get a much closer bond, right? And so with athletics, we have both. We have a task and we have social orientation. But as you guys get out of college and you go out into the workforce, you'll probably experience a little bit more task orientation with groups than social orientation. So, research on team success, there's a lot. I just wanted to make it as simple as possible. There are several potential moderators of cohesion performance relationships. So talking about that smooth and rough, right? A moderator is a factor that modifies the relationship between the independent variable, this will be our cohesion, so it's unaffected, and the dependent variable, team success, which definitely would be, right? That would make sense. That's dependent. Based on how well we mingle, probably has some type of influence into team success. As far as research goes, we've found some different moderators that influence cohesion. We have gender. The association between cohesion and performance is slightly greater in female teams. We have type of sport. Previously reported, cohesion may be important for team success in interactive sports such as basketball, volleyball, and hockey. Makes sense. It can be detrimental to independent sports such as wrestling, tennis, and badminton, as well as level competition. Very few studies have examined team cohesion across levels, so high school to professional. The question of whether cohesion is equally important for teams at entry level of competition requires further research. But even though more research needs to go into these areas, I think we could all fairly agree that cohesion differs between children and professionals, right? There's a little bit more emphasis on some variables, like for children, it might be social status and social interaction. And then us that were older professionals, it might be more based on like task performance. I want you guys to take a second real quick and look at the gender one. Why might some research be reported that females have greater cohesion? Why is performance significantly greater? So trying to avoid bias, which is hard because we've had lots and lots of years into females are more feminine and emotional, and men are more logical and, I don't know, let's use the word stoic. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe there's less competition with females. Maybe there's some studies out there that they are able to focus more on the goal as opposed to not independence is not the right word, but wanting to compete against each other, which would absolutely affect cohesion, right? A personal anecdotal one for me is we just talked about wrestling, right? Being more independent. I liked a few wrestlers throughout grade school, but I never felt close with a lot of them, and I think I've compared it to I'm like constantly having to fight for my spot, and that's hard to form relationships off of. It's hard to have cohesion, and then you take this wrestling sport and you have duels where you want to cheer on your teammate who's out there, and it felt a little bit disconnected for my experience. So it's interesting. It's interesting that females have a significant greater performance level. Some of the studies didn't really list a why, so it'd be interesting to look into that. So yeah, that's all I had. I should have ended on a better sentence, but moving on. Okay, team building. So, process of causing a group of people to work together effectively as a team. It's kind of within the name, right? It's designed to increase motivation, promote cooperation. So now we're getting into the points of like, how does the athlete or person affect the audience, and how does the audience affect the person? These protocols are designed to set team goals, ensure that the roles among the team are understood and accepted. Practices are efficient. Leadership is coherent, effective, and acceptable. We have good team communication, and we're able to recognize potential weaknesses and minimize their effects on the team. Some of this takes a little bit of emotional maturity, right, to be able to recognize, hey, we're weak in these areas, without feeling like that's a personal thing. Let's all get together and work on this, and that makes a really effective team. If you guys are interested in this type of thing, I can find and post it in one of the discussion boards, but I believe Apple has a really good article on kind of their protocol of team building. And it's really interesting. One of the things they do right off the gate is not necessarily always hire for the most qualified and the one with the most experience, but the one whose personality fits the team best and how they mesh. And we can see multiple points in here, right, that requires communication. Maybe Apple's viewpoint is, without speaking for them, we can teach you all the tech and data and things that is needed, but can we teach you to be a good person? Can we teach you to effectively communicate? Interesting stuff. Impact of an audience on sport and sport performers. The general effect of an audience is to raise the arousal levels of the participant and improve their performance. But for some competitors, the audience will be a source of considerable stress and cause anxiety. Kind kind of sounds like me a little bit. So a review of this literature saw that an audience can have an impact on cognitive, so self-concept, and physiological, the actual arousal levels, the aspects of the performer. So it can impact their abilities. When the athlete performs in front of an audience, if the individual believes that they can meet the demands for the situation, they experience challenge. I'm excited about something that is a stress response I can handle. If the athlete believes that they have insufficient resources to meet the demands of the situation, not of the situation, then they experience threat. Interesting. This may affect the athlete's autonomic nervous system. Maybe most of you guys have heard of the cup analogy. We can only handle so much water until it pours over. If it's something that we are capable of handling, if it's something that's not necessarily new, if we have a high tolerance for stress, then maybe we fall in the majority of the challenge category. Or if we are based on biological or how you view the world, so psychological or social, how your parents raised you and who you're around, maybe we have less of a tolerance for stress. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Life is stressful, so we do kind of have to rise to the occasion. But at some point when that cup overfills, we start to produce cortisol. And it's no longer a exciting challenge. Now it's a survival. I have to survive. Sounds weird, right? If the first time I taught, extremely stressed out, I was experiencing this threat system. And over time I got better at it. But I was just teaching, right? There's no bear. There's no one with a gun. It's interesting how the body cannot necessarily perceive the actual physical threat, just that our stress has skyrocketed. In a previous study, athletes were asked to complete a well-learned task, so a challenge, something that has been learned, right? Touched on a second ago. And then unlearned task, a threat. The challenge in purple, athletes experience an increase in cardiac performance, awesome, and a decrease in vascular resistance. So, we didn't have any dilation, I don't know why I can't pronounce that word right now, constriction of the blood vessels with the challenge. Blood flow is easily able to transfer. Their O2 efficiency was high and did not decrease. We perceived it as a challenge. We were able to have a good cardiac output. However, when it is a threat, we get into that cortisol production, and that absolutely increases vascular resistance. Why? Why is it when stress is too much, our cardiac output gets worse, that our vascular resistance increases? Why would that happen? We touched on cortisol. Do we know some benefits of cortisol? I know we're not actually in class. It's kind of just a habit, but I want you guys to think for a second. So one thing cortisol has is it can be a mild, we'll put in quotations, pain reliever. So you are not just perceiving a threat, you are shooting out cortisol to prepare yourself for damage. It's pretty crazy. We are preparing ourselves to get hurt. With that, right, we would not necessarily increase our cardiac output. We are preparing to get injured. Maybe we're going to bleed, and this way it would slow the bleeding, right? We're not as efficient with our heart and pumping blood. There's a lot of interesting stuff about what we actually do as a threat. Fortunately, the drawback is we're less efficient. So if it's in a sport competition, we want to make sure the athlete is staying away from that threat-like experience. And if I'm sneaking in what I really like about psychology, we want to we want to avoid the threat-like responses in relationships, right? Not only are we producing cortisol, we're almost getting numb, but the second we enter this fight or flight system, our critical thinking goes out the window. We are no longer thinking about this is my partner. I need to think about this objectively. I see that they have feelings. I disagree with them. How do I navigate their feelings where they feel heard, but still believe in the facts that I've seen, and we work through this? And that definitely does not take a fight or flight system to get to. So it's hard. We have to fight that. And what I've touched on before, right? We don't have a bear in front of us. We have a partner, or we have a friend, right? So we're not necessarily perceiving this person as a danger to me. It's just stress has overfilled the cup. And when it does that, the response is the same. When danger. So these have positive and negative effects. Some things I talked about, but the size of the audience, right? So maybe I can handle teaching to 2 people, but 60 make me nervous. I've been doing this for a while now, so none of it really makes me nervous. Maybe the density, so how many people are there, how loud it is, the audience behaviors. I remember it took me a while. I used to teach a kids training class at a gym I worked at, and it was only 5 to 6 kids, but the parents were there, and it was up to me to herd these cats, and they weren't always like the best. And I remember feeling those type of stress responses. I'm dealing with children. They're not a threat to me in any way, but it took a long time for me to learn how to communicate to someone who's not, I don't know, 18. I can't talk to them like 18-year-olds. And so getting better at communicating to them so they would have to listen and finding ways to distract them and do that, it without even paying attention to it, I went from a threat level to a challenge level. And then maybe absence of audience. So maybe athletes improve their performance based on how many people are there. We have people who rise to the occasion, and then we have those who do better. That do better when they're alone. I will pull from a MMA example. I know that might not be the most relevant for everyone, but I've heard for some of the athletes I've trained and just being a fan and hearing things that sometimes you'll go into a gym and you'll have the fighter who's famous, and then you'll have one of their main workout partners they practice with, and that main workout partner beats that fighter a lot. So you would think, right, that one's better, but why is he not famous? And when it comes time to rise to the occasion, where people are around, there's lights shining in on you, cameras in your face, that individual cannot handle it. It's no longer a challenge, as a threat. And they start to fall into behaviors that do not represent their techniques. They start just reacting. They start being lazy with throws or emptying their gas tank too soon. So it kind of depends on the person. Maybe we need a lot of people. Maybe we don't. So, coping with such an arousal. Physical relaxation techniques. We have different techniques that are progressive in relaxation, such as meditation and breath control. I did fact check a little bit of Dr. Huberman. He made a video about how to calm yourself down in like 5 seconds, something catchy. And it was a correlation of a study that saw that the shorter the inhale and longer the exhale is, somehow that gets you out of that autonomic nervous system and gets you into a state of homeostasis. I think that's right. A short inhale, long exhale. We might actually have to fact check me that I remember that correctly. So it's interesting how some different breathing controls. Meditation focuses on being mindful, right? It gets us out of that threat level and being able to critically think. We can have mental imagery. So this reflects the feelings of relaxation, stress, anxiety, or arousal in relation to sport competitions. If you guys are studying and you're listening to a relaxing song on YouTube, what's the background? Is it two people fighting? Is it a stream with animals hanging around? Is it clouds? It's generally something pretty calm, right? So we talk about the mental imagery and how powerful the brain is. There's a lot of studies that support thinking of calm things helps calm you down. A soccer player who may experience debilitating levels of arousal when performing in front of a hostile crowd. They see and hear the crowd. It increases their arousal, and they need to use a breathing strategy to remain in control, thus bringing the arousal levels down. Maybe you guys have seen this before. I don't know if any of you have done therapy, but if you have verbal vomited to your therapist, they'll do something where they'll go, and then they'll talk. That could be perceived like you rambled or said way too much, but what it is actually them digesting the information they got. Maybe it was a bit overwhelming for them, and now they can actually talk to you. You may see someone getting ready for a fight, or a football player with a camera in front of them, they're warming up, and they take a big deep breath. That's the same thing. It's almost instinctual. Don't forget to breathe. Okay, I kind of sped through this for you guys. I got it in 20 minutes. We'll upload it and get the assignment up. Bye-bye.